Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the FIA Group.
Hi, welcome to our FIA podcast. This is Lisa Hill, and I'm a senior subrogation attorney here at the FIA Group. And today I am sitting with Rebekah.
Good morning, Lisa. As Lisa said, this is the FIA Group Empowering Plans podcast. And Lisa and I today are going to go back to basics. The basics being, before you can recover subrogation dollars, you have to be able to identify where is subrogation potential out there in our world. In an effort to do this with a little more entertainment and some holiday flair, we have a little story that we are going to read a section of and stop. And as you listen, try to identify where are our subrogation opportunities in the same. Lisa, you ready for me to get going with our first segment of our story?
Very excited. Let's move.
All right, here we go. And it's kind of a familiar rhythm. So here we go. 'Twas the night before an emergency room trip, when all through the street not a creature was stirring, not even a parakeet. The stockings were hung by the heat vent with care, in hopes that presents would soon be there. The children were jumping all over the bunk beds, while visions of drones danced in their heads. And Mama in her Snuggie and me in my track suit, which is groovy, had just settled down for a good Hallmark movie. All right, Lisa, there's section one. What was in that one? Did you see anything there?
I saw a couple things. For me, one of the first things that jumped out at me was bunk beds and class action suits and possible product liability. What happens if those things fall or pull away from the wall and the kids get injured while jumping up and down on them? I think that's subrogation opportunity number one. How about you?
Nailed that one out. The one that I'm going to point out, and because it becomes crucial later on in our story, is that the stockings were hung by the heat vent with care. Well, hanging a stocking by a heat vent is probably asking for a fire. So we have something with potential there. And then have you seen the drones? There's lots of litigation over drones. Where can you fly a drone in someone's yard? Can you not? That's really not our subject to subrogation, but what it is how many people do you know that have flown a drone into someone else's body? Maybe it's just in my family that this happens, but drones are not as safe as one thinks. So there is definitely some issue there with potential of the drone going rogue or being driven poorly, flown poorly, I should say, into someone else. So, just in our first few sentences, we have plenty of opportunities. Next we go, and to when out on the street there arose such a boom, I jumped from my recliner and ran with a zoom. The street light shining on the sidewalk of ice gave the reflection of metal carnage, none of it nice. Away to the alarm, I ran like a flash, entered the code, and ran outside in a dash. When what to my red eyes should appear but a city bus full of people full of fear. With a bus driver in a red and white cap, I knew in a moment he'd been taking a nap. More radiator hissing than a pit of snakes. When that bus driver yelled, it was clear there were mistakes. He yelled for the police, an ambulance, and a rescue, to the emergency room for help to become good as new. So into an ambulance the bus passengers were put, covered in glass and doused with fire soot. With the ambulance full of people in need, the fire truck to the hospital did lead. All right, there was a big good section, Lisa. What are we seeing here besides an obvious car wreck?
Absolutely. That one's really chock full. Well, first we have some ice on the sidewalk. Is there some subrogation potential there? Did somebody trip and fall? Was somebody responsible for cleaning that up? You know, as well as I do, that in some of the states where winter weather is fairly prevalent, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and those types of things, the duty in regards to clearing ice and snow is very different than it is in some of the other areas. They tend to look more towards when they were clearing the snow and ice, did they make a man-made dangerous condition that then caused an injury? And that's more likely to be held liable in states like Wisconsin and Michigan than it probably would be in, let's say, Kentucky, where, snowfall is a little less prevalent. That's the first one I see.
Absolutely.
How about you?
The ice, absolutely. Whenever there is ice, whenever there's any type of accident that takes place outside, I think it's just a very good practice to look to your weather. Was weather a
Correct.
factor? And then if weather was a factor, was this just an act of God, an act of Mother Nature, something that does not have potential? Or did some humans get involved, as we were discussing, to make it into a more dangerous condition? So sometimes, trying to help doesn't help, it makes it worse. So that's something, as you pointed out, to be very cognizant of when talking about accidents in ice. The next thing
Absolutely.
that I noticed here is that our bus driver had been taking a nap. So we do clearly have some liability on our bus driver here because either he or she was asleep or they had just woken up. So they had a nap. So far we have a stocking hanging by a vent that's probably going to catch on fire. We have bunk beds that could have all kinds of known issues, drones that are known to cause injuries, ice on the sidewalk. We have a driver with a nap. Well, let's see where we go next.
Oh, wait 1 second. I want to add something to that driver who took a nap. This also happens to be a city bus, so we could be talking about some governmental immunity here, which could end up waiving some liability. So go on.
You know what? That's exactly right. We have a city bus, so we have some governmental immunity issues here. You can look, and sometimes I think that when we're trying to identify subrope opportunities, that there will be a thought process that we're reaching. This is not reaching. This is just what is there. These are true
Yes.
factors that lead to an injury. So I think that that's a good note. Well, here we go. It was with the turn of my head that I found one factor of this crash. A huge reindeer was pillaging through the trash. He was clearly dazed and lost. He had gotten free of his cage at the zoo as they had skimped on the cost. When the reindeer got spooked and ran towards the bus, it was then that the driver started to cuss. He tried to avoid hitting the deer, but there was no safe place to steer. The bus hit a pole and off to the hospital they all go. So here we go. Now we have something very seasonal.
Absolutely. And this part I love because there's so much fun things in this one with the reindeer, and he got free of his cage. So is now the zoo involved? Because they skimped on the cost, it says, and that's why he got free. So do they have a part in this negligence and in this accident that just occurred in all of these injuries? Can they be brought in as a party?
I would argue that a reindeer might be a dangerous animal. It's not domesticated. So I think that
Correct.
they probably owed a higher duty to keep the animal contained. And when they skimped on the cost, so that's another when, we were talking earlier about the various levels of liability and who is responsible. And this is not just a wild animal attack in the wild. We have an animal who's
Right.
broken free of an enclosure. So that one is kind of fun.
It is. And we also then have to consider, too, if you're in an open range state, too, which could make a difference as well if the reindeer is out. Because there are some states that, allow cattle grazing and other types of herd that don't necessarily have to be penned in. They're in a free range or open range state. So we'd have to look at those laws, too, and make sure that it's a requirement in the area that they're in that wild animals or non-domesticated animals be contained somehow.
Great points. We're finding more and more subro. Here we go. When the bus driver awoke, he was able to recant the details of the crash, and he blamed it all on the reindeer's mad dash. What caused the crash? Was the driver asleep? Was the crash due to sleet? Or was it the reindeer that escaped from his fleet? Amazing first responders saved all but one injured kid, while the reindeer ran off ashamed by what he did. That darn reindeer totally freaked out. He ran smack into an elf on a city scooter without a shout. It keeps getting worse because the driver of the scooter had just had 6 things of an alcoholic shooter. The scooter driver was way overserved, but when the reindeer came charging, the driver never swerved. What have we here, Lisa?
We have quite a few things right here. We could actually have a good dram shop act here. If the reindeer was truly overserved and had more to drink than he should have, then it becomes, we can look back and see what the dram shop laws are in that particular state and determine whether or not the bar should have served him, when they should have cut him off, and what their responsibilities are on that. So we might have some liabilities coming from the bar that overserved.
And, we noticed that Unfortunately, everyone was saved except one child. And that brings us to the fact of, okay, when we have a minor who is injured, what do we need to look at there as far as special considerations?
That's a tough one because the court systems tend to favor injured minors and they're very sympathetic to the injuries that they might have incurred. So some of the things that you have to look at when looking at those things is in those states, who's actually responsible for claiming medicals? Is it the parents or is it the child? Most states will only allow the parents to claim medicals. And so we would can only subrogate against the parent because they are the ones claiming the medicals rather than the child. And also in minor situations, when it comes time for settlements, you have courts that will have to approve those settlements. And so you've got to come to an arrangement with the attorney. And this is kind of regardless of whether or not you're a self-funded ERISA plan. The settlement courts for minors, which is usually in the probate court, in most states, they tend to have exclusive jurisdiction. So they can make the decision as far as the allocation of funds and how much will go back to the plan and how much will go back to the child. So minor settlements and minor injuries are a little bit tricky. You've got a couple fine lines you've got to walk.
Yeah, it's important when you're identifying all your different potentials. We've pointed out several times for us, the state where you are, the location, it's going to matter because you may have different options in one state or jurisdiction that you don't have in another. So let's see what happens to the end of our evening here. Well, let's see. As you'll remember, the scooter driver was way overserved. So when the reindeer came charging, the driver never swerved. Next, out on the street, you won't believe what went down. The scooter flew into a Volkswagen driven by a clown. On this night, we now have an icy bus crash along with a clown smash, a reindeer running free, and an elf on the sidewalk, drunk as can be. It was back at my home that I witnessed the smoke. Had to grab my family with speed, no time to poke. I had to explain as we fled out of sight. There has been third-party liability like no other tonight. And what do we have here in our ending?
Oh, we have a heck of a night. Well, we have this scooter that flew into the Volkswagen driven by the drunken elf. And again, we might have some issues with liability too, because we again have a city scooter. So we again might have to look at governmental immunity as well as what people are responsible for while they're driving the city scooters. And, as we indicated earlier, looking back at where the elf was overserved and what kind of responsibility they have in it.
Absolutely. And in looking back at my home that I witnessed the smoke, you know what? It has to be from that stocking hanging by that heat vent. And my question here is the stocking flammable? Did it have a warning on it about it being flammable? Because I think everybody knows this time of year, if you have a stocking, the goal is to hang it near a fire. There may be some product liability issues there to look at to subrogate for, if anyone was injured in the fire, we have that, but we also have property and casualty subrogation potential from that fire. I think that we've looked at quite a few different situations. Some have a little bit of a silly ring to them, but they all have an educational opportunity in that, you need to look for subro in some unique different places.
I think that you're absolutely right. It just goes to show that you kind of have to look around and examine all the pieces when looking for, subrogation potential so that you might not miss out on an opportunity to boost your recoveries and help keep down those costs.
Well, Lisa, I appreciate you joining me today and having this conversation. And I hope that our listeners enjoy the little bit of brevity brought with the poem, but also enjoy pointing out of some unique subrogation opportunities that we want to make sure we don't miss.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebekah. It's been a whole lot of fun. We wish everybody happy holidays and a happy new year.
Thanks. Bye.